Hi, everybody. Welcome to Christian Homestead. My name is Jared. We're back at archive.org. It's a free online library. And it was sometime last year that I came across this document called Signs of the Times 4 PDF. This was uploaded to archive.org December 15th, 2014 by Joe Pye 91. I don't know if he's the author of this or not. But essentially, it's a list of prophecies that have to do with the second coming. And at the beginning of this year, I made it my New Year's resolution to go through this with a fine-tooth comb and just see if there was anything I was missing, see if there was anything on here that wasn't accurate, or, because I'm not a big fan of these type of like timelines or lists of prophecies, because a lot of times the assumption is that you know what a certain prophecy is supposed to look like, or you assume the timing of a prophecy, that it has to happen before the second coming, when in reality it's not exactly clear. Other times the issue is sometimes people think that something is literal when it's not, or they think that it's figurative when it's not. So I don't know, but I know that whoever put this together had the best of intentions. It's not meant to tear them down. But what I decided to do was I took everything on here and I added it to my own spreadsheet. This spreadsheet is called Quotes, Prophecy, Signs of the Times PDF. And I'm just going through, and I've done a number of videos already looking at some of these. And in column D, you have the author's opinion, because that's what they put here in this column right here. There's these different symbols that he uses to say what he thinks about these prophecies. And then in column E, I put my opinion. And today I decided to color code my opinion just so you can more easily see the conclusion that I came to. So if it's green, then yes, it's been fulfilled, or it's an ongoing fulfillment. In the case of, let's see, column 12, we got one here where it's talking about the cities of New York, New York, Boston, and Albany being destroyed by fire, which when we looked into that, it was determined that this is conditional. It doesn't have to happen. It's not a certainty. It's not like you can say the second coming can't happen yet because we haven't seen New York City destroyed by an earthquake. It's conditional. And then you have other things on here that are false prophecies. So what I want to show you is actually a list of entries on here that come from the same prophecy. So according to the references, this is from John Taylor in Wilford Woodruff's journal. And then he also cites another source, a book called Unpublished Revelations of the Prophets and Presidents of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Volume 1. What I did is I found this book. We're actually going to read this prophecy directly from Wilford Woodruff's journal, but I also went and checked this other source, and I'm glad that I did. Thankfully, that is also on archive.org, although the pages don't match up with what's on the PDF. So I don't know if this person was looking at a different version, a different edition of this book. But you have volume 1 right here. You have volume 2. I think there's a third volume, but you only have these 2 volumes on archive.org. And one really cool thing about this series of books is just like what it sounds. There's these unpublished revelations. It's important to note, as did Kenneth C. Godfrey on BYU Studies, that this series of books contains revelations which are either actual or alleged. So you have to, just because it's printed in a book, you can't automatically assume that it's real. You need to go to the primary source. You also need to see what prophets and apostles and church leaders have said about that prophecy, if anything's been said. But I'm going to go through this. I'll put a link for this in the description box below. It looks like there's some really interesting things in here that I don't think that I have or know about. In fact, I'm really interested in this one June 24th, Kirtland, Ohio, a revelation given to the prophet Joseph Smith concerning the 24 temples as shown in the plot of the city of Zion as related by himself. I really hope that's something that I haven't come across yet, in that it has more details about the 24 temples. We do have some that you can find, like some details that you can find on the Joseph Smith Papers Project website. But anyway, this could be a treasure trove of things that we haven't covered on the channel before. Okay, and then, sorry, one last thing. In case you don't follow me on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok, I recently pointed out, and I actually recently did a live stream. They've done some renovations at the Far West Temple site. This is what it looked like before. You see how there's steps, and then you had these three concrete, whatever, columns or whatever. There's like one here in the middle. Well, now they've taken out that middle one and they got rid of the steps. And during the live stream, it was pointed out that this is going to make it easier for people who come to visit and they're in wheelchairs. It looks like it's narrower. I think that's why there's this gap between the fence and this. So I don't know if they're going to extend the fence here or what, but it looks like it's going to be a narrower entrance. But I just wanted to show you that. This is what it looked like on Monday. We went there on Monday just to enjoy the day. We were on a spiritual high from General Conference. And I was surprised to see that they were doing some renovations. So, and then a couple days later, this is what it looked like. I guess I'll need to make another trip up because I think they're probably going to paint these things white to match the rest of them that are around the temple site. Okay, so this is what is on the Signs of the Times 4 PDF. The first one is, and this is all from the same prophecy. In the city of Salt Lake, as I was wandering around the streets and in all parts of the city and on the doors of the houses, I found badges of mourning, and I could not find a house but what it was in mourning. Okay, so that's the first prophecy, Salt Lake City in mourning. The next one, in cities around the country, the streets will be filled with the dead. Okay, the next one, thirst will be so great that people, mothers killing their own children, will drink blood to quench it. And this is where I start to question if this is a valid prophecy or not. And then, let's see, that one's from another one. Okay, this one, desolation will be found in Washington, D.C. The White House will be empty, and the halls of Congress the same, and everything will be in ruins with the people gone. The next one, Chesapeake Bay will be stagnant and will carry the stench of death. And then in Philadelphia, there will be no living soul to be seen, and the dead bodies will cause such a stench that it will be impossible for any creature to exist alive. And then here's, two more. Illinois and Missouri will be in tumult with family fighting family. And then here's the last one. Missouri, Illinois, and Iowa will be as deserts with no living being there, swept so clean of inhabitants that when the saints return, there will not be so much as a yellow dog to wag his tail. So pretty dramatic, right? And you don't really hear these kind of like specific details in any other prophecies. There is the yellow dog prophecy. So this one's kind of mixed in with another one, which is a false prophecy, by the way, or at least it's not a prophecy having to do with the future. It had to do with the Civil War, but it makes its appearance in this supposed prophecy. Now, I've already done videos about this. My friend Jessica with Christ Pearls, she has a Second Coming channel. Make sure to subscribe to her. I'll put a link for her channel in the description box below. She had sent me this book, or referred me to this book called Victims, the LDS Church and the Mark Hofmann case, which focuses on the Mark Hofmann case. But he points out toward the beginning of the book that this prophecy that we're about to read from is false. I had no idea. People had shared this prophecy with me when I started my channel, and I was like, oh, and it's supposed to be a prophecy of John Taylor. But then Jessica sent this to me, and this book pointed out that presidents of the church had already declared that it's a false prophecy. So that's what I have here as my opinion in column E. Let me zoom out. So here's my copy of the Signs of the Times PDF in rows 13 through 21 are false. This is all from a false prophecy. And you have the sources over here. The first one to speak about it was Joseph F. Smith, because originally they were saying that it was Joseph F. Smith that gave this prophecy. You can pause and read this. I'm not going to go through this. Here he is again talking about it. He points out that he never knew French, because as we're about to read it, you'll see that the author says that they spoke French. Later on, others attributed this prophecy to John Taylor because he spoke French. If you go to his Wikipedia page, it says here, in 1852, the Book of Mormon was published in French, with Taylor and Curtis E. Bolton credited as translators. So people used to say or think that it was Joseph F. Smith. Later, they said it was John Taylor, but Joseph F. Smith said that this was a false prophecy, and then so did his son, Joseph Fielding Smith. He says, it seems strange to me now, some 12 years later, we still find them in circulation. But the thing that astonishes me more is the fact that members of the church seem to be bewildered and in wonderment whether or not these purported revelations were indeed given to the prophet Joseph and to President Joseph F. Smith. Later on, I'm just going to read the parts that I have highlighted. And when we find people secretly distributing what are said to be revelations or visions or manifestations that have not come from nor received the approval of the authorities of the church, we may put it down that such things are not of God. We do not need to write to ask questions in regard to these things. We do not need to question them for a moment. Who is it that is deceived in this church? Not the man who's been faithful and is in the discharge of his duties, not the man who has made himself acquainted with the word of the Lord, not the man who has practiced the commandments given in these revelations, but the man who is not acquainted with truth, the man who is in spiritual darkness, the man who does not comprehend and understand the principles of the gospel. Such a man will be deceived. And when these false spirits come among us, he may not understand or be able to distinguish between light and darkness. Anyway, that's all I need to read from this. You can read the whole thing. The link for my spreadsheets is in the description box below. But it's not a true prophecy, and there's still people today that think that it is. So let's go ahead and read it just for the fun of it. I don't know. I think it's good for us to read, because then we can hopefully detect other deceptions and other false things that have been put out there. Because I feel like a lot of times they have the same kind of tone as this does. Okay, so we're on the Wilford Woodruff Papers website. This is his journal that goes from January 1st, 1873 to February 7th, 1880. And this is the entry for June 15th, 1878, a Saturday. Okay, he says, this is Wilford Woodruff. I wrote 28 and spent most of the day in the office. Okay, so at this time, he was working in the church historian's office. He was an apostle, but he had this like extra duty, I guess. He was in the church historian's office. I had a very strange vision copied in the office today of a desolating sickness which covered the whole land. And then he copies down what he found in the office. And you can see right here. So it starts out right here. a vision. That's the title, I guess, that he's giving to it. Salt Lake City, night of December 16th, 1877. I blank went to bed at my usual half hour past 9 o'clock. Now, this is a very important detail. I blank. If you go up to what Wilford Woodruff wrote in his journal, you can see it right here. There's an actual blank because Wilford Woodruff did not know who wrote this. He wrote this down just in case it was a true prophecy with the intent to find out who did it. So he just left this part blank where the name would go. It just says, I blank went to bed, da 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 da. So we don't even know who wrote it. What we do know is that Joseph F. Smith and Joseph Fielding Smith said that this was a false vision, but Wilford Woodruff did not know that at the time. Okay. I had been reading the Revelations in the French language. So there it is. People were like, oh, it's Joseph F. Smith. And then Joseph F. Smith was like, I don't know French. And then later, as it continued to be copied and distributed, and nowadays people are like, well, who knew French? Oh, it was John Taylor. No, he knew French, but he did not write this. My mind was calm, more so than usual, if possible to be so. I composed myself for sleep, but could not sleep. I felt a strange stupor come over me, and apparently became partially unconscious. Still, I was not asleep, nor awoke. With a strange, faraway, dreamy feelings, the first I recognized was that I was in the tabernacle at Ogden, sitting on the back seat in the corner, for fear they would call upon me to preach, which after singing the second time, they did by calling me to the stand. I arose to speak and said I did not know that I had anything special to say, except to bear my testimony of the truth of the latter-day work, when all at once it seemed as though I was lifted out of myself. And I said, yes, I have something to say. It is this. Some of my brethren present have been asking me what is coming to pass. What is the wind blowing up? I will answer you right here what is coming to pass shortly. I was immediately in, let's see, where do I click on this to go to next? I was immediately in Salt Lake City, wandering about the streets and all parts of the city, and on the door of every house I found a badge of mourning. And I could not find a house but what was in mourning. So here's that first one that we saw on the Signs of the Times PDF. The person took this part and made it one of the prophecy items on his document. I passed by my own house and saw the same sign there and asked, is that me that is dead? Something gave me the answer, no, you'll live through it all. It seemed strange to me that I saw no person on the street in my wandering about through the city. They seemed to be in their houses with their sick and dead. Really quick, I just want to point out, if this was a true prophecy, if it was an actual vision of the future, and let's say that this was John Taylor, well, John Taylor is not alive anymore. And I'm not aware of any time that this happened in Salt Lake City to where he was alive to see it all. So we have some logical inconsistencies here if this was a true prophecy. All right, continuing. I saw no funeral possession or anything of that kind, but the city looked very still and quiet, as though the people were praying and had control of the disease, whatever it was. I then looked in all directions over the territory, east, west, north, and south, and I found the same mourning in every place throughout the land. The next I knew, I was just this side of Omaha, It seemed as though I was above the earth, looking down to it as I passed along my way east and saw the roads full of people, principally women, with just what they could carry in bundles on their backs, traveling to the mountains on foot. And I wondered how they could get there with nothing but a small pack on their backs. It was remarkable to me that there were so few men among them. It did not seem as though the cars were running, and rails looked rusty, and the road abandoned. And I have no conception how I traveled myself. As I looked down upon the people, I continued eastward through Omaha and Council Bluffs, which were full of disease, and women everywhere. The states of Missouri and Illinois were in turmoil and strife, men killing each other and women joining in the fight, family against family, cutting each other to pieces in the most horrid manner. The next I saw was Washington, and I found the city a desolation. The White House empty, the halls of Congress the same, everything in ruins. The people seemed to have fled from the city and left it to take care of itself. I was next in the city of Baltimore and in the square where the monument of 1812 stands in front of St. Charles and other hotels. I saw the dead piled up so high as to fill the square. I saw mothers cut the throats of their own children for the sake of their blood, which they drank from their veins and to quench their thirst and then lie down and die. You guys, the people that make these things up, I feel like you can tell that it was written for sensationalism. You know people in your life like this, right? Maybe not people that would go so far as to do a whole thing like this, but have you not had times in your life where you're talking to somebody and you can tell that they're embellishing or they're flat out lying because they want to get that excitement from you? They want you to be like, oh my gosh, where did you hear this? Or how do you know that? Because then it makes them feel special. And I feel like that's what's going on here. It's like this very detailed, um, very interesting vision, full of emotion and horror, and it sets itself apart as very special. This is unlike other prophecies that you've heard before. So it's just the whole thing is suspicious to me. All right, continuing, the waters of the Chesapeake and of the city were so stagnant, and such a stench arose from them on account of the putrefaction of dead bodies that the very smell caused death. And that was singular again. I saw no men except they were dead, lying in the streets, and very few women. And they were crazy mad and in a dying condition. Everywhere I went, I beheld the same all over the city, and it was horrible beyond description. Okay, next page to look at. I thought this must be the end, but no, I was seemingly in Philadelphia, and there everything was still. No living soul was to be seen to greet me, and it seemed as though the whole city was without inhabitant. In Arch and Chestnut Street, and in fact everywhere I went, the putrefaction of the dead bodies caused such a stench that it was impossible for any creature to exist alive, nor did I see any living thing in the city. I next found myself in Broadway, New York, and here it seemed the people had done their best to overcome the disease. But in wandering down Broadway, I saw the bodies of beautiful women lying stone dead, and others in a dying condition on the sidewalk. I saw men crawl out of the cellars and rob the dead bodies of the valuables they had on, and before they could return to their coverts in the cellars, they themselves would roll over a time or two and die in agony. This is just it's so over the top, you guys. On some of the back streets, I saw mothers kill their own children and eat raw flesh, and then in a few minutes die themselves. Wherever I went, I saw the same scenes of horror and desolation, rapine and death. No horses or carriages, which, again, I'll remind you, we're now in the year 2026, and It sounds like this would have had to have happened at a time when there were horses and carriages and such. No horses or carriages, no buses or streetcars, but death and destruction everywhere. I then went to the Grand Central Park, and looking back, I saw a fire start. And just at that moment, a mighty east wind sprang up and carried the flames. Okay, next page. West over the city, and it burned until there was not a single building left standing whole, even down to the wharfs, and the shipping all seemed to be burned and swallowed up in the commotion, in the common destruction, and left nothing but a desolation where the great city was a short time before. The stench from the bodies, there's a recurring theme here. The stench from the bodies that were burning was so great that it was carried a great distance across the Hudson River and Bay, and thus spread disease and death wherever the flames penetrated. I cannot paint in words the horror that seemed to encompass me around. It was beyond description or thought of man to conceive. I suppose this was the end, but I was here given to understand that the same horror was being enacted all over the country, north, south, east, and west. That few were left alive, still there were some. Immediately after, I seemed to be standing on the west bank of the Missouri River, opposite the city of Independence, but I saw no city. I saw the whole states of Missouri and Illinois and part of Iowa were a complete wilderness with no living human in them. I then saw, a short distance from the river, 12 men dressed in the robes of the temple, standing in a square, or nearly so. I understood it represented the 12 gates of the New Jerusalem, and they were with hands uplifted, consecrating the ground and laying the cornerstones. I saw myriads, next page, of angels hovering over them and around about them, and also in an immense pillar of a cloud over them. And I heard the singing of the most beautiful music, the words, "Now is established the kingdom of our God and his Christ, and he shall reign forever and ever, and the kingdom shall never be thrown down, for the saints have overcome." And I saw people come from the river in different places a long way off to help build the temple. Excuse me. And it seemed that the host of the angels also helped to get the material to build the temple. And I saw some come who wore temple robes to help build the temple in the city. And all the time I saw the great pillar of cloud hovering over the place. Instantly I found I was in the tabernacle at Ogden, yet I could see the building going on, and got quite animated in calling to the people in the tabernacle to listen to the beautiful music that the angels were making. I called to them to look at the angels, as the house seemed to be full of them, and they were saying the same words that I heard before. "Now is the kingdom of our God established forever and ever." And then a voice said, "Now shall come to pass that which was spoken by Isaiah the prophet, that 7 women shall take hold of one man, saying," whatever. And then I don't understand this part. At this time, I seemed to stagger back from the pulpit, and F.D. Richards and someone else caught me and prevented me from falling. When I requested Brother Richards to, next page, apologize to the audience for me because I stopped so abruptly, and tell them I had not fainted but was exhausted. I rolled over in my bed and heard the city hall clock strike 12. So I guess he woke up from the dream/vision. So it's really over the top. It's very specific. You don't hear it jive with anything else that's been said by any other prophet or apostle. Maybe in a vague, general way, it does, like as far as like destruction goes and plagues. But this person is very specific with specific cities and states and um, specific acts that were being done by the people, and it just feels like sensationalism. And we have the words again of Joseph F. Smith and Joseph Fielding Smith that this is a false prophecy. So I have it in a couple places. I have it on this spreadsheet called quotes, prophecy, false / unverified. So if you look at column C, it'll tell you whether these prophecies are false or if they're unverified. So I have it here, and then I have it on this spreadsheet I already showed you. Quotes, prophecy, signs of the times PDF. This is the spreadsheet I'm using to help me go through the signs of the times for PDF with a fine-tooth comb. And I just want to point out, if you didn't know any better, if you came across this, I think the majority of people would assume that all these are valid prophecies, and they would just be like, oh, wow, this is really interesting. And here's the author's opinion over here. But yeah, we still haven't seen cities around the country be filled with the dead, or, desolation in Washington, D.C. The White House will be empty and halls of Congress the same. Everything will be in ruins. Some people just take things like this for face value, when in reality, you have this whole chunk right here. Let me zoom out a little bit. This whole chunk right here, that's just completely false. And I'm not blaming the person that put this together. This was back in 2014, so it's been over 10 years. And more and more documents and books have been digitized. We have better websites now and tools for doing research. So it's easier now than it was in 2014. And so I don't blame the person for thinking that this was true, or just wasn't quite sure. They were just trying to do their best to put together a document. But yeah, so that's why we have to be careful with things like this. I would say if it doesn't sound right, you should probably take it with a grain of salt and just feel the spirit and listen to church leadership. And if it seems out of place, then it probably is. So anyway, that's all that I have for this one. I'll talk to you guys later.